to do that today. Right, our first reading is from Mark chapter 14, verses 32 to 36. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little further, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." And our second reading is from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 to 10. "To keep me from becoming conceited because of these surpassing great revelations, there was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.' This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God."
Thank you, Stella. So as we've already heard, over this Lent season here at the Vine, we're focusing on the topic of prayer, not just talking about it, but trying to do it as well. And so I'm only going to talk for a very short amount of time so we can actually start practicing an aspect of prayer today, and I'll talk more about that later. And today we're on the topic of unanswered prayer. And I'm sure, if we're all honest, we have all experienced unanswered prayer in different times of our lives. If all my prayers as a teenager had been answered, I'd probably be standing here today, being a millionaire, living in a big mansion, and probably being married to Britney Spears. But as you might have noticed, none of those things actually happened. And now that I'm kind of older and wiser, I can sort of look back and think, maybe that was for the best. No offense to Britney, but I'm not sure we would have been compatible. So, I think God doesn't answer all our prayers, perhaps for a reason, because he knows what's best for us. And those of us who are mums and dads, we kind of appreciate this. We know that we sometimes have to say no to our kids when they ask us for stuff, because we know what's best for them. If we were a parent who always gave our children what they wanted, we'd probably actually be a pretty bad parent, and we'd have unhealthy and unhappy children. And so obviously we know that God is our Heavenly Father. He knows what's best for us, and we can sort of get that he won't answer all our prayers in the affirmative, because, sometimes we don't pray for the right things. However, that's not really the kind of unanswered prayer I want to talk about today. So let's imagine that rather than just praying to be a millionaire and, to live in a really big house, maybe your prayer is, can I just have enough money to get through today? Just to have enough food for my family? Just to have enough money to heat my house? Or maybe our prayers are to do with our health. We just really are praying quite desperately for healing for ourselves or for somebody close to us. And yet, nothing seems to be changing. Maybe it's to do with relationships. We're praying for a partner, or we're praying to save a relationship, or we're praying to have children. So even if we haven't experienced these deep longings ourselves, I'm sure we know people close to us that are going through these experiences of praying for things that maybe don't seem to be happening. And even in our intercessory prayers, so later we'll have intercessory prayers praying for the world and the nation. When we actually pray these things and we look on the news and we see nothing seems to be changing, we can just throw our hands in the air and think, well, what's the point? And somehow this idea of God as our Father, God knowing what's best for us, doesn't quite cut it somehow. So does God really want those people in Ukraine to keep on suffering and for the war to keep on going? Is that really in God's will? Does he really want me to be poor and in debt? Does he want me to continue feeling pain or feeling illness? Does he want me to be lonely? Was it in his will that that person close to us should be taken away from us at such an early age? These are really difficult questions. And the thing is, I think sometimes the church is not all that honest about unanswered prayer and these things that we actually experience in our lives. In the past, I've sat through many talks and sermons saying that God does answer our prayers. God does want us to be well and to be prosperous and for things to go well for us because he's our good Father. And so maybe the fact that you're not seeing answer to your prayers is because you don't have enough faith. And that can be hard to hear that kind of message. I remember many years ago when I was going through a particularly difficult time in life, some really good friends from the church I was part of were very kindly offered to pray for the situation. And I was very grateful for that. But as part of that, they gave me words of encouragement or words of prophecy which seemed to suggest to me that everything was going to be okay and that the prayers would be answered. And when those things didn't really come about, it felt like I was given a little bit of false hope. And that actually, even though it was from the very best of intentions, was not all that helpful. And so I think that's something to think about. Obviously, it's really good to be praying for people. It is really good to be giving people words of prophecy and encouragement. But let's be very careful about that, because if we're sort of promising somebody that something's going to happen and it doesn't, and it just gives that false hope, that can actually make the situation worse. So the church can be maybe in denial sometimes about unanswered prayer. But the fact is that the Bible is very honest about unanswered prayer. As Stella read today, that second passage was from 2 Corinthians, and that was written by Paul. And he was one of the most faithful, obedient people who really loved God and was really passionate for God. But he experienced unanswered prayer. He said that 3 times he asked for this thorn in the flesh to be taken away from him. We don't know what that thorn in the flesh is. It could have been maybe some kind of illness, some kind of pain. It was obviously something that was holding him back, and he really desperately wanted rid of it so he could be free and could actually get on with his life and do what he was called to do. But he felt that God said to him, no, I'm not actually going to heal you. He said, my grace is sufficient for you. And then we also have the story of Jesus in the first reading. That on that night that he was betrayed, on that night just before he was arrested and went to trial and was crucified, he literally got onto his knees and begged his Father to take this suffering away from him. He didn't want to go through what he was going through. He prayed that there could be some other way. And yet that prayer went unanswered. So unanswered prayer is at the heart of the Bible. It's at the heart of the Easter story, the story of Jesus' passion as we lead up to Easter. Unanswered prayer is actually at the heart of the gospel message, and so we can't ignore it. Then, of course, there's the big question that we always come to ask when we struggle with unanswered prayer, and that is, why. Why does God not answer our prayers? Why does he not seem to answer our prayers? And that's such a big question that actually there's a special word for it, for the study and the kind of answers that people give to try and answer this question of why does God not answer prayer. And so that word, if you want to add it to your vocabulary, is theodicy. So that is saying that here we believe in a God that is completely and perfectly good, but we also have a God that is all-powerful. So how come if we have a good God and an all-powerful God, do bad things still happen? What I'm not going to do is to try and solve that question for you today. Mainly because I'd probably have to talk for about another hour really to do it justice, and I'm sure you wouldn't want that. But secondly, it's also because prayer is a journey. Unanswered prayer is a journey, and we're all on different stages on that journey. And I think sometimes you've got to be at the right point on that journey in order to hear what God is saying or what reasons are. So I think it might be unhelpful for me to give platitudes or generalizations about, this is the reason why your prayers aren't being answered. This is the reason why you're going through what you're going through. And I don't think we're not always ready to hear that. It's not always the right time for us to hear that. So what we're going to do today, however, it is an important question. So I am going to just signpost you to this book, which is called God on Mute by Pete Greig. And that does really go into these questions in a lot of detail about why God seems silent. And if you don't like reading, you prefer to watch videos, just do a search for Prayer Course 2, which is available from the 24/7 prayer website and also on YouTube. And so I really commend that to you. And it's not really sort of theological and theoretical. It's actually based on stories, on people's testimonies, including Pete Greig himself. And he was inspired to write this book because his wife got really, really ill with a tumor, and despite lots and lots of prayer, she's still not healed. And so that family are going through the reality of unanswered prayer. And he talks about lots of other examples as well. So I do commend that to you. But what we're going to do today is, instead of trying to solve the problem, let's just sit in the reality and be honest about the reality that we're in. The Eastern Orthodox Church sometimes refers to Lent as a season of bright sadness. And I found that particularly helpful. So the Lectio 365 app, they do prayers every morning and evening. And the evening prayers have sort of, in Lent, have focused on reflecting both on what has been sad about the day just gone, but also what has been bright and good in that day as well. Because actually we have both, and we can't just focus on the good stuff, because that's not being honest. It's okay to be sad, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be scared. Jesus experienced all those emotions, even just in that one time in the Garden of Gethsemane. And we wouldn't be human if we didn't experience those. So as we go into a time of prayer now, I want to encourage you to acknowledge those emotions. Take them to God, write them down. But also, even in the darkest of times, there's always brightness. There's always blessings. There's always something to give thanks for. Even if it's just the simple fact that God is here. He's still with us, and he still loves us, no matter what it is that we're going through. So, let me introduce to you what we're going to do now. I think the young people are going to go out and discuss this a little bit more, but those of us here who are grown-ups, what we're going to do is we're going to have a time of silence and just to reflect on where we are at the moment. If you've brought a journal with you or a notebook with you, then please have that with you as well, or maybe like a device or a phone that you can write down. So taking Amy's guidance about actually journaling what it is that how we're feeling and what we want to say to God. We're gonna. Can you put the questions on the screen? The questions are on the screen. Great. So you don't have to use these questions, but sometimes it's useful to have something to sort of go on, something to look at. And also because when I don't do journaling very much, but when I do, sometimes I kind of I was very sort of focused on myself and my own problems, and that's fine. But actually, it's good to invite God into the conversation. So these are very God-focused, Jesus-focused questions, which just help us to invite God into that conversation. And we can say what we want to God. He's big enough to hear our angry prayers and our sad prayers and our confused prayers as well. So, but just be listening to what He might be saying to you as well. So those are some questions. What is your image of God at the moment? How is God holding you right now? What does God feel about you? Imagine Jesus sitting next to you. What do you say to Him? How does He respond? So we're going to have about 15 minutes, and please feel free to, you can stay where you are, you can move around, you can go outside into the garden, even go for a walk around the area, whatever you like. We do have some paper and pens here, so if you have not got anything to write with, please do take that. And just try and be silent. It's not a monastery or a library, so I'm not going to go shush every time somebody speaks, but it's actually a good discipline to have, to just give that time of silence for God to speak to us. But when we do come back, there will be a little opportunity for a little bit of discussion with your group as well. And just to note that anything you write down, this is not one of these where we're going to stick things on the wall or put things on the clothesline. Everything that you write is completely for your own eyes only. So you don't have to share anything with anyone else unless you want to. So I will leave you to it. We'll have about 15 minutes, but don't feel you have to look at your watch. Amy and I will come and fetch you when it's time to come back in. But just try and use this time as you can. I will be writing in my journal as well.